panel discussion on narratives from our societies that open conversations on tolerance, resilience, and curiosity. On the panel are Samina Mishra, Ashwin Guha, Lavanya Karthik, Bijal Vachharajani, and Menaka Raman. The session will be moderated by Shabnam Minwalla. Samina Mishra is a filmmaker, writer, and teacher based in New Delhi with an interest in media for and about children. Her work uses a lens of childhood, identity, and education to reflect the experiences of growing up in India. Her recent work includes Jamlo Walks that tells a story of the migrants walking back home during the 2020 COVID-19 lockdown. Nida Finds a Way that follows a young girl as she explores the world around her, including the anti-CAA NRC public protest at Shaheen Bagh in Delhi, and Happiness Class, a documentary that explores the idea of happiness seen through the happiness curriculum in the Delhi government schools. Samina also runs the Magic Key Center for the Arts and Childhood, a virtual resource center for children as well as adults working with and for children. Ashwin Guha is a math teacher and currently based in Bangalore. He is also the author of The Homework, a children's picture book. Ashwin has a PhD in computer science from Indian Institute of Science, which serves no purpose except to gain respectability among strangers. He also publishes 2 weekly comic strips, Denny the Cave Boy and Midweek Crisis. Lavanya Karthik is an award-winning author of over 30 children's books. Her books have been translated into over 14 languages, including Korean and Mandarin. Her book, The Girl Who Loved to Sing, Pijanbai, won the Atta Galata Book Prize at the Bangalore Literature Festival in 2021, while When Adil Speaks, Words Dance won a Publishing Next Award. When not writing or drawing, she can be found wandering the streets of Mumbai looking for inspiration for her next book. When Bijal Vachharajani is not reading a children's book, she's writing or editing one. She's authored multiple planet-friendly books, including Savi and the Memory Keeper, A Cloud Called Bhura, as well as That Night. Bijal is a certified climate warrior. Menaka Raman is the author of a number of picture books for children, including Gappu Can't Dance, Topi Rockets from Thumba, and Ira Investigates the Invisible. Her book, Loki Takes Guard, won the Value of Words Award for writing for young adults. Her short stories have appeared in anthologies published by Penguin, Speaking Tiger, and Scholastic India. She has written on parenting and children's books for some of India's leading newspapers. Shabnam Minwalla, who's going to moderate the session, is a mother of 3 teenagers, an ardent sari shopper, and a Mumbai-holic. She has spent most of her life with words, editing her school magazine, working as a journalist with the Times of India, and writing non-fiction. But what she most enjoys is writing books for children. Her first book, The 6 Spell Makers of Dorabji Street, is being used as a reader and has been performed as a play by many Mumbai schools. Her books for young readers, The Shy Supergirl, Lucky Girl, and When Jia Met Urmila, are immensely popular, and When Jia Met Urmila won the Neve Book Award. Shabnam has also written the Laugh a Minute Nimi series, short stories in a number of anthologies, a stack of picture books, and a popular non-fiction book on the Mumbai neighborhood of Kolaba. Her 2 new books for young adults, Sarah Zariwala is Afraid, winner of the Atta Galata Bangalore Lit Fest Award, and Murder at Daisy Apartments, winner of the Author Award for Children's Book of the Year, have delighted horror and mystery buffs. Shabnam got her MA in journalism at the University of Southern California in Los Angeles. She was also a Chevening Scholar at Wolfson College in Cambridge. Thank you everyone for joining us.
Thanks everyone for coming. This is the first time I think I'm moderating a panel, so I'm a bit gripped by the heebie-jeebies, but let's cross our fingers that there is no horrendous misadventure. You know, I started my writing career in a very different world. I started as a journalist. And journalism is a contradictory world because, on one hand, you're supposed to be highly objective and highly neutral and fill all your copy with words like allegedly and he says and she says to make clear you are not saying anything. After 10 years of journalism, I sort of strayed into children's writing. And I was, the thing with journalism, though, is you are also supposed to be pushing issues, opening discussions. It's not something your editor tells you, but you know you've become a journalist to change the world. You're very clear about that. When I entered children's writing, I felt a sense of real relief. I didn't have to say he said, she said anymore, and I didn't have to change the world. That's what I felt. I thought now I can have fun, I can tell stories, and I can, you know, generally play around with language. I think 3 or 4 books into my life as a children's writer, I started realizing that nothing is so cut and dry, nothing is so clear cut, nothing is so black and white. And I started realizing that with children's writing also, there are a lot of things that you maybe could be doing, should be doing, questions you should be asking or prompting. This is a question that has stayed with me because I honestly don't have an answer to this, and because I'm lucky enough to have this fabulous panel of people who've all written books that I think are absolutely magnificent and have all, in a way, consciously or unconsciously raised issues, started debates and discussions, triggered curiosity in children. I thought I would put the question to them, and let's see what everyone has to say. So, Samina, what do you feel about the business of being a writer for children? Do you feel you just have to tell a story, or do you feel it's important for us to be doing something more?
Hi. So, Shabnam, I think art is about actually examining life. You know, I mean, we know that old adage of, you know, art holds a mirror up to society. But, you know, apart from that, I think even in the everyday business of artistic practice, it is about really understanding human existence. Now, whether we do that because we want to change the world in a very conscious way, or we want to do that because we want to live and examine life for ourselves, in some senses, change, it is about change. No, it is kind of inbuilt in that. It is, we want to understand human existence because something needs to change, and we are imagining something that lies ahead that perhaps should be different. So in that sense, I think we can't get away from it. We are all in that business, you know. I mean, journalism too, we know now there is no such thing as objective journalism. So the question is about, like, examining. And for me, as a children's writer or even as a filmmaker, the process is actually the critical thing, and interrogation in that process. So if I want to interrogate the world, I need to interrogate myself, I feel, to begin with, no? And what is, like, what is my position? Where am I writing from? What do I want to say? And that thing that I want to say, what is its relevance in the world? You know, I have to interrogate myself for all of those things. And I would imagine that that is true because I straddle documentary film and writing practice. For me, that process is the same. So I would imagine that that is true of all artistic practice, no? So whether we are writing for children or we are painting or we are writing for adults, I think it is about that, you know, how to lead that examined life.
Bijal, what do you have to say about this? Because I think we were having a small discussion before we jumped into this panel, and I feel her views may be a little different.
So it's twofold in that sense. If somebody had told me when I was a child that you'll grow up to be an author, would be like, no, authors are magical beings. They don't really exist. And so for me, that 12-year-old, I think, is always there, who wanted books for friendship as companionship. And I realized that I actually started writing because I wanted to talk about the other companionship that I always had as a very shy child, and it was nature. And I believe that nature is magic, it's everywhere. And that's why I do write about it. And as we were discussing, it often gets slotted into these issue books where it's just like, you're writing about climate change, you're writing about grief, which is all true, but I'm also writing about other things. And I think what's happened is that a lot of these books get highlighted in the media, in everywhere actually, and everyone's constantly like, wow, everyone's writing about these heavyweight issues. I think we need to see beyond that also and celebrate the fact that we have all sorts of books. We've got funny books. Somebody please like make a noise about those because they're so much fun. They're the books I give to people I love to read. We've got sad books which also I like, but I do think that we need to have that balance with all books, which we sometimes, as journalists, as a former journalist also, we don't highlight. We're just like, Hunger Games, look at that.
So absolutely, totally agree, because I know that it sometimes the issue becomes the only talking point, and then everybody feels immense pressure. So yeah, Menka, your books have touched on, I mean, they've told wonderful stories, but they've also done a little more. How deliberate was it? And when you have interacted with children, when your readers have come up to you to talk about the books, have they talked about these issues? How have they touched the readers? Expectedly, unexpectedly?
Thank you, Shabnam. So I think with one of my books, Loki Takes Guard, it was really, the premise is, of course, a girl who wants to play cricket on an all-boys team and is told that she can't, and how she kind of goes out to see if she can find a way to make that happen with some help from people. But the book does kind of, I didn't set out for the book to also talk about certain other things, which were then, when other people read it, said, oh, but this book also talks about double standards, about how people treat divorced women, and, things like that, which I really didn't set out to write a book about those things also. Last week, Bijal and I were very lucky to go to Indore, and we met some school students over there. I think the first thing I was absolutely amazed by is that my book is set in Madras. It's a very Madras book. And these, kids and a lot of young boys, which made me really happy, from Indore, Madhya Pradesh, came up and said, we really liked your book and it was great fun and things like that. But also the kind of things that the children picked upon. So many of the kids were fascinated by Loki's grandmother and said, how do we get our grandparents to also come on board and support us with the things that we want to do, and how can we, bring them from where they are? They're quite conservative and traditional at times. One or two girls came up to me and said, how can we have conversations with our father and our uncle? We want to have these conversations about what we want to do with our lives. I have to say, I was terribly unprepared for these answers and felt very unqualified to give these young people any advice. But it was amazing that these were things that, and if someone told me when I wrote Loki that people would come and ask me these things, I wouldn't have really believed it. But it was great. Another boy came and said, I want to start an inclusivity club in my school because there's homophobia in my school. And how do I do that? So I think these books, readers take different things, that maybe you're not fully conscious of why you're putting them in there, I guess. But they do take the things that resonate the most with them. And that's, I think, what they hold on to. So it was a great experience for me, and I felt very lucky.
Thanks. Lavanya, your Dreamers series must have prompted a lot of discussion and, in a way, real-life inspiration of the purest kind. So how have your readers reacted? Have there been unexpected, expected? What are the kind of responses you get?
Well, I've had all kinds of discussions because each of the stories is very different. Again, like Menaka said, I'm amazed at the kind of issues or themes that children, pick up, and the questions that come from them. I found that, for the most part, a lot of the books, because the books focus on some famous people who were as children, there is a certain connection that you can make as a child to another child who is scared or who is being held down by rules. The one that gets the most response is the story of R.K. Narayan, who is essentially a loser as a teenager. He was a big failure at everything, especially the one language he loved, which was English. He couldn't even pass his English exams. And this was a boy who wanted to be a writer, and nobody wanted to read his works. He was literally bribing his friends with tea at the local chai shop to read his work, but really there was no response. And he reaches a point where he wonders if maybe the world is right and he is wrong, that he really should not be wasting his time or anyone else's. And I think that story seems to resonate the most with people, because everyone has, even grown-ups, you have these issues, the self-doubt. I think most of the stories are really an examination of your own ability to see yourself, or to sort of gather the courage to build on a dream that you have. I always find I learn so much just from the way people read the books that I've written. It's sort of great conversations that I have. Yeah.
No, I totally agree, because sometimes the most unexpected things pop up. Like in my mind, my most frivolous series is about Nimi. She's a middle school girl, and it's a fun, flighty series. But after every Nimi session I ever do, I'll have 3 little girls waiting to talk to me, and they'll say, "Auntie, my best friend doesn't like me so much anymore." And it breaks my heart, because we all know that feeling of a best friend who's wandered away. And I had never read this as a book about a lost best friend, but obviously. But Ashwin, your books prompt a lot of questions and interest in the whole business of creativity and curiosity. How have children what have they said to you after your interactions, or have they contacted you and talked to you about it in any way? How does it?
Yeah. So, as a teacher, I am always in touch with students, and some of my students have also read the book, and yes, they enjoyed the book. But what surprised me was the way they enjoyed it, or what parts of it they enjoyed. So, my book is about, it has a lot of wordplay. It has how words can be misinterpreted, like how charger means a mobile charger and also a charging bull, and so on. So I enjoyed the wordplay of it and so on. But there were lots of other aspects which I was kind of surprised that the children liked. And today in my book reading session, I had like a wonderful response from the kids. So it was like, the story is a funny story. It's about how we misinterpreted things. It is not set to talk about creativity or curiosity, but this is a happy byproduct. And I am very happy to see that it is actually reaching out to the kids, that they are appreciating it. They are appreciating that, oh, this has happened to me, that sort of thing. What really surprised me was the unexpected things that kids kind of realized. So to answer your question, yeah, I've had like a good response from the kids, and I was actually kind of skeptical. I don't know if the kids will enjoy this book or whether it's appropriate for them, but the response has been overwhelming to me.
Bijal, what are the kind of discussions? Your books are in a way very they are right out there. They're really raising things that everyone is talking about, and I think every school, for example, wants their children to talk about. And how have children reacted to your Bhura and Savi?
So I think I've lost a friend in this school bookstore owner, Amit Sareen. He said basically that his son read Savi and the Memory Keeper twice, and he said he couldn't understand why. And he went up to him and said, "But isn't this a sad book, because the girl's lost her father?" And he's like, "No, Dad, it's really funny." And he called me up and said, "Listen, I'm very upset with you. You have no business writing this." He's not sad that the dads died in this book. That said, Indore's going to come up again. We were in Indore, and there were children who had already read our books, and they were presenting them to us, just like what happened yesterday at Neve. And it's always lovely to hear your readers tell you about the books. And then this one girl, she was just waiting at the fringes, and then she took me aside, and everyone kept saying, "Madam Samosa, Madam Chai." And she just took me aside, and She said, I lost my father 2 months ago, and Savi is something that actually made me feel less lonely. And then we spoke for like a good 30 minutes. By the end of it, both of us were crying. She was just talking about how she dealt with the grief on an everyday basis when relatives would come over. And she said reading my book made her look outside, which she realized was helping her. And then when she left, she told me one thing. She said, I haven't spoken about this to anyone. And so thank you for coming. And I don't think I was also equipped to answer many of her questions. But at that moment, I felt like there was one child who felt that this book was for her. And for me, that was really, really important. And then there are also my eco champions who are constantly writing, saying, ma'am, we've started a composting thing in our society. We are making our school no plastic zone. There is a snail in my garden. Can I make it as a pet? And I'm like, no, don't.
Too cute. Samina, your Jamlo is about sort of when the children who read the book probably don't have the same experiences as your protagonist. Were they able to empathize? How did they feel about it from the gut? What was their reaction?
So, Jamlo Walks is the story of Jamlo, but there are other children in it as well. So when I wrote the story, I just wrote the story. I didn't know what it was. And so it kind of evolved into the final form over a period of time. And I think it is, actually, it's a wonderful example of collaboration between, I think, editor, illustrator, and writer together. And I think that in that process, one of the big challenges for me was what is the form this story? I mean, of course, it was an important story, and I felt it should be shared with the world, but what is the form that this story should be shared in? And this, it was a very spare story, and, there was, because it was locked down, normally my work, because I'm a documentary filmmaker, for me, it's really important to be outside and out there, and a lot of my practice comes out of that. And because I was not out there, I really couldn't think of how it could be fleshed into something bigger. So we decided to put it out and in this form. And I think like this whole thing of, like picture books being considered for younger children, what is the age that this book should be for, it was a big challenge and something I really struggled with. And the big champion for Jamlo Walks is sitting in the audience, Sujata, who really, I think I really picked her brains a lot in this process, because she's all the time in touch with kids. And so for me, it was the thing. And of course, I think it is a story. While it is in the picture book form, and of course, all of us here don't think that picture books are only for young children. Yeah, we don't. But we know the reality out there, it is that it will be put in that category, and so I think it would be good for the book to be used with 9 or 10 plus kind of kids. Anyway, after whatever, and it came out, and the book, whatever thing, and I still wondered. And what I did before, in that process, I shared it with a few children, and I got some responses from them, and they were all like, it is very sad, but it's a very important story. Of course, these children were English-speaking middle-class kids. So anyway, we did whatever we had to, and the book came out. But it is really in this last year that I see, and my sense of the book also has changed. And there's been some incredible work that, Parag Lakshmi is also here. They've done incredible work in pushing the book out with very different kinds of readers. So even before the book was translated into Hindi, it was being used with non-English speaking children. And a lot of work by library educators and people on the ground to do that. So it has actually been a very moving thing for me to see that this whole idea that we talk about window and mirror, how this book actually has worked like that. So, for children in Jharkhand, they've talked about how, it's very sad, but it is something that they recognize, yeah. And this idea of, like, there has been a little bit of squeamishness about, like, how do we talk to kids about this? Like, it is unsaid in the book, what happened, except if you read the note. And some people have talked about the discomfort of, like, how do we talk to children about it? Is it really meant for kids? The thing is, children experience death and loss. And we know that in the last 2 years, they've experienced it in the most horrific ways. So it's a little bit, I think if we pretend that they don't have experiences of that, then I think the problem is with us a little bit. So the question really is acknowledging that if you want to use this book, you need to be prepared to talk about uncomfortable things. And, one of the, I told you about the Adivasi children, but it's been used with middle-class kids. Like, I have shared it also, but I really want to talk about, somebody who used it with kids in Bangalore in a school with grade 3, grade 6, grade 9. And Teju shared in the session that the book worked across the ages, in fact, worked with grade 3 and grade 9 really well. So for me, then it becomes that, and they are identifying, like, there are the other children in the book, they are identifying with that. And for them, Jamlo's story is the window. So I feel it is really, there should be all kinds of books available for children. But we also, as adults, and this is what we do, we share books with kids because, we read something and we really want to pass it on, or, but I think as adults, then it is incumbent on us also to reflect a little bit, like, there might be a book which requires some conversation. There are books which you can just leave, and there are books which require a conversation. And also, I think it's okay that, we want to share this book because we think it's really nice and, it's important and whatever. But there may be a child who rejects it. And I think that's also okay, and you just leave it. And then maybe you try again after 6 months. So I'm taking a lot of time to basically say that this last year, the responses that have come to me from all these very different groups have kind of, like, my confusions that were there, even when the book came out, I think those have kind of dispelled.
Wonderful, thank you. Menaka, in the current political climate, actually this is for all of you, and the way things are in the world and in our country, are there topics, issues that you feel jumpy about raising? Is there anything that you would be squeamish about touching? Or, I mean, we've all seen, we've had friends whose books have been tossed off shelves and that kind of stuff. And is there anything that you're afraid of? For anyone?
I don't know if there's a topic I'm wary of taking on, but I think as a writer, if I do have an idea, I sometimes do question, am I the person who should be telling the story? That is something I think of a lot more than whether should this story be told or should this theme be told. I think the question also that we need to ask ourselves is, should we be telling the story? Is there someone else who might be better placed to tell it?
No, have to agree. I think she said it perfectly.
Yeah. I must admit, a lot of my books have these themes, and often I have journalists who ask me, why do you write about this? I've been asked, why do I write about caste pretty much constantly. I also have a lot of political stuff in my books, and I feel like they're embedded enough that I'm hoping it's being read, like the kids are getting what I'm trying to say. But I think we're all just going to keep saying what she said, because I do write a topic about nature and climate change, and it's become one of the most polarized topics right now, which if you had been in the session earlier and listened to the children, you would have realized it's not a polarized topic. Everyone's very clear on that.
Yeah, to answer your question, I personally wouldn't feel squeamish about certain topics, but what would hold me back is whether I can do justice to that topic. So whatever I write, it needs to be honest in the sense that I need to be honest with myself. So the book Homework, it's about slackers who forget the homework and they do a rush job at the last minute. So now, yeah, I totally identify with those characters. But say I am writing about disability. I have not had personal experience with disability. So I'm open to definitely write about such an issue, but I want to make sure that I write it properly, that I write it in a dignified way that conveys to the readers. So in that way, that would hold me back, but not the topic as such.
Yeah, I think it's about like the how of it. How do we tell that story? And that is, I think, the most critical thing. And that would then, what Menaka said and what Ashwin said, is sort of like that's the entire range of it, you know? That like, that we're telling a story because that story is an interesting story and you want to know what happens next in the story. But everything else is like, it's the context, it's the fabric, like, you know, it should come through in the texture. It's not that the story should be about that, you know. So this tick boxing of diversity and tolerance and, you know, that's I think the problem. Like, so and that comes more, I think, I mean, of course it affects, like for us as writers on this side, the onus is interrogation, interrogation, interrogation. But I think it comes also from the larger climate of how like books are put out into the world, no? The marketing and the slotting and, you know, how you describe something and all of that. So that onus is on the world.
Okay, on this fabulous note, I'd like to know, does the audience have any questions for any of the panelists connected with the discussion, or even mildly connected with the discussion, even loosely connected with the discussion? Any?
Thanks so much for a really great discussion. And what I want to ask is, I think Devika really wanted to be here, and this is something we were talking about with Devika as well. I just wanted to, when when we write a book, especially on, you know, certain issues that are typically considered adult for children, I think there is, kids actually really do want to engage with it, right? Like, because at least I remember as a kid I was curious and I also wanted to you know, seem a little more grown up than I was. So I'm sure like there's enthusiasm from the kids, but we were talking about how adults sometimes might not be equipped to answer the questions that come out when kids read something, and that might be one of the reasons. Again, I'm not saying that they don't want to, but even if they do want to engage, they might feel that this is a topic I don't know much on. For instance, say gender and sexuality, like over the last 10 years, the kind of conversations that have come out and the kind of language that has evolved as a result of the conversation, people who come from a time before that, like, might not even know those words or how to, you know, sort of talk about it. So, I mean, I'm just wondering, I think there needs to be, like when we say that kids need to be engaging with these sort of topics, then what about the role of the adults? And, you know, how do we reach out to adults so that the adults are not standing in the way of kids kind of accessing this material and engaging with it and all that? So that's...
Is it to anybody specific, or can just...
So firstly, I would like to say that, so it's not that we think kids should be engaging with these topics. Kids are engaging. The question is, how are they engaging? No? So our interventions are perhaps going to lead them to engage in a certain way. So of course they are directed. And we need to be mindful of that, that there is, it's not some pure child space where we are getting some pure children's response. It's never that. It is always in a context, and we are kind of intersecting in that, no? That there is a, we're leading that conversation. So then we have to think about where we are taking it, how we're going to take it. And of course, we can never, like, everybody can never know everything. That's never going to happen. So again, it's just a question of thinking about, so when you don't know something, what do? Either you try to find out yourself, or you find other people who do and you bring them into the conversation. No. And you're right, I think, about working with adults. This was something, in fact, that came up yesterday also in the conversations. Of course, the adults are the gatekeepers and work needs to be done with that. But I think there isn't necessarily a hierarchy of, like, you know, where do we begin the work first? I think we have to, like, work across multiple spaces.
Can I also just add to say that as a parent, of a 14-year-old and 11-year-old, parents, please don't be lazy. I'm sorry, parents who are still saying that I don't know how to have this conversation, or I don't know the words, or I don't know what these things mean, please go out and equip yourselves and read and watch enough OTT programs, I think, on Netflix talking about, some of these topics and themes in really great ways. If you don't know, tell your kids, I'm sorry, I don't know, but let's sit and find out. I think books can provide a really safe space for children to, engage with some of these themes. But also if children then outside of those books in the real world, in their own families, do not see some of these ideals kind of reflected, they're not going to believe in it. So I think rather than saying, I don't know how to have this conversation, I can't talk to my kids about sex or sexuality, find a way. You might not know it already, but reach out to friends. There is so much help available out there today. So I think the onus then is also on adults to kind of do better by our kids.
Thanks. Anybody else wants to respond to this? Or shall
Thanks. I'm sorry I stepped in only towards the last half of this conversation, so if I'm repeating something you've already discussed, my apologies. We're sensitive as adults, as writers, as readers, about the graphic nature of whether it's a visual or whether it's in text. So when you touch upon emotions, how deep do you go? Like Shabnam, you write across ages. So there, and Shabnam, in the most recent book from last year, there's fear. There's actual real fear in there, which maybe perhaps you wouldn't have had for one of your younger readers. But just kind of, even for that degree, like how deep do you go? How far do you push it? Can you just discuss that?
Well, so I'm very conscious because every time I write a book, I try to time travel to myself as I was at that age. And I think that is my first exercise when I start writing for a particular age group. I think of the teacher I had then, I think of the friends I had then, and I think of the fears and my anxieties. I was a very anxious child. And I think I try to pitch to that child. That may not be a representative child, but it's the only way I know how to go to that space. So I'm careful. And actually, even when I wrote Saira Zariwala, I had my daughters read it. And I said, how frightened are you? So one said, I couldn't sleep for one night. The other one said, I slept, but I feel a little creepy. So I felt, okay, that's fine. That's the level I wanted. I definitely wouldn't step into a realm of a lot of graphic blood and gore because I don't believe that's necessary or desirable. But I definitely wouldn't have had the same mechanisms of fear in a whole book or in a Nimi book. I would have been much more careful. So I think as writers, we are all very careful about who the book is for. But then, of course, there are some books like Jamlo, which are valid books that tell a story that a 3-year-old to a 90-year-old must know, must understand. And I think those books get trickier. And I guess that's where parents, teachers, and all step in to help peg it to that level.
Yeah, to add to that, I had a luxury of writing a very fun book. So for me, it was not so much as to be kind of tiptoeing around the emotions, but rather to exaggerate and elevate the emotions. So now the conflict to start with is they need to submit a homework assignment the next day. So for those kids, it's a matter of life and death. So it is like oh my God, if I make a scratch, now it's like the teacher is going to kill me. So I had this luxury of playing it up, which other authors probably didn't have, in the sense that they are writing about serious topic, they shouldn't get too light-hearted or get too graphic. But yeah, like I was kind of lucky to not be bound in that constraint where I could just let the emotions run free over there.
So very quickly, I think 2 tools I use constantly, which is humor, because I find that I use humor whenever I'm in an awkward situation, so I use that in my writing. And the other thing that Menaka constantly blames me for is that my endings are constantly something vague. And I'm like, no, but I added hope to that. And I think when you're writing for children especially, I believe that you can talk about fear, you can talk about lots of things. I do believe that hope needs to be somewhere embedded at the end so that you're not leaving the bleakness that maybe perhaps I feel constantly. I feel like I need to do better for my readers. So hope and humor.
Well, yeah, I'd add to that. I also write a series which is sort of part graphic novel called The Ninja Nani. And it is essentially, it is an over-the-top, ridiculous slapstick, uh, with really crazy characters. And it is often just seen as a ridiculous, silly, over-the-top series. But I have always found that kids have reacted to the relationships between characters. The fact that they could relate to, some of the kids in the book. There is a character who's a dog, but the number of people who relate to the dog, to the way he has aspirations to stardom. So I find that finally as writers, you create this door for kids to walk into a world that they discover for themselves. I don't think we can or should know all the answers or be able to predict what they find in a book, but just to create a space for kids to be ridiculous, be silly, to acknowledge that, a dog that thinks it's a superstar or a grandmother who's a ninja, it is fine to like it. I think create an ecosystem where you can like poetry, you can like a serious book, and you can like a pug that's a superstar. I think you just need an ecosystem. You want kids to be able to enjoy books for what they are, which is diverse and silly and unexpected. And I think just that itself is I mean, my job is done then. That's about it.
Yeah, I wanted to say something, Rasil, that, when I think that I think about emotion because we also experience those differently, with some things are more intense in certain contexts and the same thing may not be as intense later. So I really think it depends on what the story is and what form it is that we are telling in. So I think much of like the use of humor and all of that will depend on like, what is that story and like what is that form that you have chosen to write it in. So I don't think there can be a uniform sort of answer to that. It is something we have to, again, the process and interrogation.
So what I was trying to say now a little is that my reason behind the question is because I wanted the audience to hear and understand how much thought that goes into writing about writing characters, writing the story. It's not just shock and awe that most authors are going for. It's really sensitive. It's a child for an author in many ways, right? Because you're birthing a story and you're doing all sorts of things. So and I think you all answered it beautifully. Thank you so much.
Thanks. Do we have any more questions? Okay.
So, I'm Dhruv from the school. I've read all of your books. Like, they all have very diverse topics and like interesting characters. Is there one character you relate to the most or that you defined after yourself?
I always say that Loki is actually the person I wish I was, more than who I really am. I spent most of my childhood being very obedient and very pliant and listening to what everyone told me. So I think when I wrote Loki, it was really, I wish I'd been that way. Spiky, doing what I wanted, not really caring so much about what other people thought about me. So that's me.
Well, I'm going to go all hog and say that the dog I mentioned in my Ninja Nari series, that's totally me. I think with great aspirations far beyond my capacity, but still going for it anyway. So that's me.
In a cloud called Bhura, I have this character called Amni. And she's this really passionate child who wants to do things and she does them. And a lot of people read it and said, is that you? And I said, I am, to the point that I've always wanted to do something as a child. I never felt I had the agency. And what I did was, I added that in my plot because that's what you do with fiction. You add all the masalas that you couldn't do as a child. So Amni would be me.
So for me, my book has 3 characters, you could say, and each of them have different traits. Like one guy is very imaginative, he doesn't care whether it makes sense or not, he's willing to be silly and so on. And then there's one other guy who is very meticulous, who is very anxious to submit a good homework and so on. And then there is their elder sister who is a know-it-all, who will be very dismissive, who will not entertain her siblings. I feel that I am all of them. It is possible to have all of these contradictory traits, and it's possible to have it at the same time also. This is something that I have realized now that I've grown up. Because earlier it is like, I don't want to be Superman, I want to be Batman, I want to fight in the night. But now it is like, yeah, you have all of these traits, and some of them, it's like it's there in a part of you somewhere. And there is a way that they can all coexist. So I would say that I would identify with all of my characters in the book. And what was really unexpected was, in the end, the teacher actually appreciates that homework where they draw a very weird shape. Now, I would like to be that teacher. That would be an aspiration for me.
So I think, yeah, there's a small part of you in almost, I think, every character. So I would say, yeah, some bits I see of myself in different characters in the stuff that I write. But if you ask me to pick one, so I have a book called Shabana and the Baby Goat. And it's about a little girl and her friendship with the a baby goat, who of course will grow up. But I think maybe that one, because I've always wanted to have a goat as a pet. It's still one of the things I aspire to. And it's that the goat and Shabana keep getting into trouble. And but you know that getting into trouble then also leads them to figure something out. So I think I identify with her.
Okay, so now I'm really confused because I think, like they said, I really love my villains. They are my absolute favorites. The meaner and wickeder they are. So I think it says something rather nasty about me. And if my 3 daughters were here, they would say yes. But yeah. No, I really understand how the villainous mind works more than the noble mind. Sad. Yeah.
Hello, everyone. My name is Neha. I'm founder of a company called Wobble, and we create 3D immersive audio of fantastic books like your books from global authors and from Indian authors. So this is a really great learning experience for me. We strive to make our audio as real as possible. So it will be great to hear from all of you that in case your books have to be created in an audio space, how would you make it as real as possible? What would you give us as an advice to make that happen? Do you have any of your books in audio, by the way? Just a question. Maybe you already do.
I think a lot of our Pratham books are on audio on our platform, but
Okay.
I would suggest come for one of the sessions from any of these authors and you'll see how they lend themselves to audio, because everyone here is fabulous when they read out. Almost
Oh, yeah,
all
I've
of
been
these
listening.
books, all of these books are for audio, and I think we're out of time, so.
Thank you. I mean, wonderful panel, and everybody talked a lot and nicely and said a lot of, I think, things that made me at least think. I hope made everyone think. And thank you, super audience, asking so many questions, smiling at the right time, and just being so attentive. Big thank you.